youngsters. Great chance here. That does it. Steve McGavin. And for the first time, Colchester United have won a major final.
Still Garcia, finally the company arrives and it's in! It's a freak-out goal from Ricardo Carvalho. Richard Garcia wants the credit and the shock is on at the bridge.
And it's promotion for Colchester United. They've made it into the championship for the first time in 69 years.
Porter, being held. There is Porter, and that's Maka!
Welcome to another special edition of Beyond The Barside Meets. And Si and I are joined by the former head of performance analysis at Colchester United and the founder of the EBL performance analysis platform, Enda Brannock. How are you doing?
Hi guys, thanks for having me on. I'm doing good, yeah.
Good stuff. So it's great to speak to you. Obviously, since September, when you left Colchester United to focus on your own platform in EBL, things have sort of taken a really steady, positive trajectory there. But we'll start with your time at Colchester United. You left your role, as I said, in September after nearly 2 years at the club. How would you reflect on your time as head of analysis, and what were you trying to build during your time at the club?
Yeah, so for me, when I first came into the club, it was actually Matty Etherington who was there, and Dimitri was the one who initially contacted me. He was the director of football at the time, and Matty was obviously the head coach. So that was what the interview process looked like. So for me, as you can hear, an Irishman, I never really kind of thought that I'd be able to work in football. But like you said, kind of through EBL and just building up a following on that, it kind of made me realise that maybe this actually is something that I can do, because in Ireland, in terms of the professionalism of the setup and these kind of things, it's not really there, It's improved in the last few years in particular, but when I was kind of seeing if I could get into the industry, there was one full-time analyst in the entire country, and even the role itself, when I was kind of growing up, was not even necessarily, massively like advertised or even a known thing. It was kind of like, football clubs are just full of coaches and players, and that's it. Obviously the physios and the sports science and that kind of thing, but in terms of people who, would like to analyze the game, that's not really a thing. But luckily, just through doing my kind of work on Colchester, on EBL, that led me to Colchester. And then my time there was unbelievable, So by the time I actually got started, it was under Danny and Nicky Cowley. And they are, some of the most special people I've ever met, So I'm absolutely so lucky to have worked with them, and also at Colchester. Like the club itself was unbelievable from minute one to me, and specifically Danny and Nicky and some of the staff at the club. I will have lifelong relationships with them. And I think, before we talk about the role itself and the analysis and these kind of things, I think the most important thing, and it's probably one of the biggest cliches in football, is it's actually the people, and the relationships, and even in terms of like the fans coming and you see the same faces, obviously like Si, see him coming to, Barrow away or down to Wales to Newport, and, travelling and literally dedicating their lives to the club. It shows how much football means to people, because, from the outside, people may think, Colchester, not that big of a club, but, it certainly is, when you've got that many dedicated fans and that many people kind of going to games every single week. And, it really shows how influential that football actually is in people's lives. But to actually answer your question, so yeah, for my time really at Colchester, so I came in as basically Dimitri hired me, in his words, kind of just for my knowledge and kind of through the work that I did at EBL. And yeah, for him, it was more so about I could learn the kind of technical aspects of the role because it is quite a technical role later. And but what matters most to him is the football knowledge, and I was definitely aligned with that kind of methodology and way of thinking. So for me, as soon as I kind of got familiar with Danny and Nicky's methods, then we had a phenomenal relationship really in terms of how to work, and luckily for the way we saw football was very aligned, and I think that helps, because I think sometimes if I'm an analyst, and especially at League Two level, you might think it's not the most tactical league in the world, which is true at times in terms of a lot of the games can be quite direct and very physical and all of these kind of things. But that in itself is actually, there's a lot of detail that may go into that. It's not just booting the ball and then there's a scrap. There actually is details in terms of how you can position yourself to win the duels, and to how to actually compete in the duels and all of these different kind of things. But yeah, look, my time at Colchester was incredible.
It's interesting that you speak about how the role of the analyst didn't really exist sort of as you were coming through, and it's a role that's certainly developed more over time and has become more prominent, certainly in a lot of fans' eyes over time. But I think with that, fans often hear the word analysis, but don't always understand what it means and understand sort of what your role entails on a day to day. Is it a case of you're getting the data from training and from games and presenting it to a head coach like Danny and Nicky Cowley? Or are you sort of going in there with your own opinions and insights as well?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the context of each situation, really. So for me, luckily with Danny and Nicky, they're very hands on in terms of certain coaches will just want you to basically, so say for example, they just want me to provide an opposition analysis of how the opposition play and kind of just break down what they do, and then you give that to them, and then the coaching staff will go away and come up with their own game plans and like how we should beat them and what we need to be wary of in terms of threats and these kind of things. But luckily for me, Danny and Nicky were extremely hands on in terms of directly involving me with kind of like, so not just saying that this is what the opposition do, but also this is how we should beat them. So I think a lot of the times analysis is misconstrued with exclusively being like numbers and data and these kind of things. But for me, that's very much so secondary. I think the best analysts are the ones that can analyze a game of football and watch a game of football and break down the kind of tactical aspects of it. Because even for me, like when I was in the role and I was interviewing for an intern to help, and obviously at Colchester, the thing about Colchester is a lot of these clubs, like for example, we played Brentford in the Carabao Cup, and they had 2 buses worth of people coming to the game, whereas at Colchester we had maybe 5 or 6 first team staff, and that was it. So and even up on the gantry where we were obviously analysing the game, they had 4 or 5 analysts, and it's just me and the and the other analyst there at the club as well. And uniquely though, Nicky does come up to the gantry as well at Colchester, which is something that I think is definitely good for coaches to do, because they can see the game from a tactical standpoint. Because sometimes if you're on the touchline, it's very hard to kind of see the overview of the game, which I think is definitely something that is good. But yeah, so for me specifically, like to kind of give fans an insight into what the role actually entails, I'm basically just trying to give the team the best possible chance to win. And the way to do that is with Nicky and Danny, very much day-to-day basis, in constant communication. I spoke to them more than I spoke to my own family for years, because obviously I'm Irish, I'm living over in Colchester. It's, I'm there by myself. My family's back home in Ireland. That's what I'm doing, so if let's just try and take you through a week. So say for example, we have the game on the Saturday, my week would essentially start then on the Sunday. So we would do the post-match analysis. So we wouldn't be in the training ground that day. I would do the post-match analysis. I would probably have a conversation with Nicky, who looked after a lot of the analysis with me, just in terms of what he saw, what I saw, and we would compare and try and take the learnings from it. I would put together a meeting for a Monday morning, and then we'd have a coaches meeting just with the coaches, and we would go through some of the details in the game, and then essentially we would showcase a review to the players, so a condensed version of the coaches meeting essentially. And from there, that's when the training and all these kind of things happen, and then I kind of go into to my own world of analysing then the next opponent. So all Monday, all Tuesday, I would spend watching the next team, maybe 4 or 5 games, and yeah, not kind of just picking random games. I try and pick games that are specific in terms of how Colchester play and what we do. So I wouldn't just watch a team that don't play like us. I would try and pick out teams, even if it was 4 or 5 months ago, pick up teams that play similarly to us to say, okay, this is what we can do to hurt them, and this is what they do against teams that play like us. Now, of course, I would watch their last 2 or 3 games as well, because that's necessary context. But yeah, try and kind of tailor my analysis towards the context of what Colchester do. And then maybe on the Tuesday, then I'd kind of showcase some of those clips to the coaches just to give them an insight. This would then be Danny and Nicky's first view of what the opposition do, and I would present that to them. And then the Wednesday we would have a day off, and then from there I'd have a conversation with Nicky and say, okay, he would ring me and say, I'm going to set up training tomorrow like this. Can you just clarify what the opposition do in X, Y, and Z moment? And then we would go through that, and then he would prepare training accordingly. And then Thursday, again, we'd then showcase this meeting to the players, say this is what they do, this is how we can beat them. Friday, we would do a set piece meeting, and then Saturday, the day of the game, we would do like a game plan meeting, say, okay, this is basically how we win the game. And that's kind of pretty much the process. So it's that was the way I worked anyway, and the way I worked with Danny and Nicky. And of course we would use data and these kind of things as well to further inform that, but it was more so kind of a basic overview to kind of point us in the right direction and to see if that aligned with what I saw with my eye.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting, that sort of that understanding of the unique ways that opponents play and the unique vulnerabilities that they have as well, and sort of finding ways of being able to exploit them, and how you as an analyst and Danny and Nicky as the coaches can sort of come up with a game plan to do that. Were there any moments or matches in particular at Colchester where you really saw the impact of what you do in a week by week translate onto the pitch?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think part of the reason Nicky was up on the gantry in the first place, I'm not going to take credit for it, but I think, we would have so many conversations about the tactical aspects of the game, and we would watch, like, part of the analysis process is, instead of watching games on like a TV angle, you can see the entire pitch, so you can see all 11 players on both teams at once. So it's just a much clearer view, and it's also like it makes it kind of less emotionally involved, because if you're on the touchline, like, the game is just chaotic, and sometimes if you can be kind of just slightly removed from it, and he couldn't scream onto the pitch, for example, it then means he has to be clear and concise in his messaging down to the bench to then get that message across down to the players. And so it happens every game. I'd be up on the gantry and I would see something, and so my job is to see, okay, first of all, is the opposition doing what we expect, and then secondly, are we executing the game plan in relation to that? And then there's lots of different variables that are going to happen there, because sometimes they might completely change their style of play, and it's like, okay, well, we need to adapt to that. Or they're playing exactly how we expected, and we are maybe not executing our game plan in the way that we should. There might be some subtle detail or something that we're not doing correctly, whether that be, when we have possession or we don't have possession or on a set piece or something like that. So it's about always being aware of that, and anytime things were good, like I'm a big believer in the analysis kind of. I think it's quality over quantity. There's no point me just saying there is a problem and just identifying it, but then not giving a solution. I remember Roy Keane told a story when he was at Sunderland, and he says one of his coaches or one of his analysts came up to him at half time and says the opposition are getting loads of balls into the box, and that was it. And he's like, yeah, but right, what can I do to stop that? Like, you know. So I always remember that story, and for me, anytime I spoke, I think it was I'd send it around. This is the problem. This is what we can do to solve it. And then I would give that information to Nicky, and then he would then feed that down to the bench. If he saw fit and if he agreed. There's many times, of course, football is a highly opinionated game. There's many times he didn't agree. We'd talk about it, and then we'd go from there, and that's fine, But it's all about just ultimately just trying to win. That's all we cared about. When we did disagree, that's fine, no problem. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and that's to win.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned Nicky going up on the gantry. That's always been a source of debate from both Hughes fans and in particular the opposition fans.
Yeah.
Found it very antagonising seeing Nicky up there, particularly when the gantry sort of level with where the supporters are sitting as well.
I don't think it's they found it annoying he's up there. I think it's more his quite vocally voicing his opinions at times that people could obviously easily hear, couldn't they? I think that's what kind of upset people. So when obviously you're doing like the play meetings and stuff like that, do you find some players buy into the whole analysts a lot more? Like, do the younger players, because they've grown up with it a bit more, put more emphasis on it?
Definitely, I completely agree with that. I remember one time we were doing an analysis meeting, and Lyle Taylor, he just literally just said to me, mate, like, I know how to play football. Like, I know what this is, so I don't need to be shown this. Which I thought was pretty funny. Like, I think he was probably just, having a laugh. But there are, I think younger players in particular, they're just younger. They don't have as much experience. They need a little bit more guidance. And I think a lot of the analysis will be kind of centered around them. So, we would do individual meetings with players, kind of take out some moments from the game that were specifically applicable to them, and say, okay, maybe you can improve here, or you did this well, or whatever it may be. And also, we might show clips of best practice clips of like some of the best players out there, and say, you're a similar kind of profile to this player. This is what he does well. You should kind of model yourself on him. So that there'd be one-to-one meetings with players. There'd be kind of department meetings with players. Maybe we might get the back four. Maybe we might get like a fullback and a winger. We might get the number 9 and the number 10. 2 centre halves. Whatever it may be. Just always trying to get an edge, really.
It's interesting with the best practice sort of clips as well. Particularly last season and to a degree this season as well. We had a sort of a combination of more experienced players and younger pros sort of within that same starting 11. Did you ever model one off the other? So I'm thinking in particular with Lyle Taylor last season. Was he ever used as a sort of role model for the younger strikers like Samson to sort of pick bits up for their game in particular?
Definitely, yeah. No, that's actually a great point, because obviously Lyle was he's kind of coming to the end of his career in terms of his age and these kind of things. But some of the work he used to do, like defensively in terms of pressing and tracking back and these kind of things, was incredible. Like, and I think that sets the tone for the entire team. It gets the fans up. It's what everyone loves, when one of the most technically gifted players who's played his entire career at a top level and scored hundreds of goals is the one who could have an arrogant attitude, is actually literally being the one who is working as hard as possible. Then there's so much to learn from that, not just on an individual level, but on a collective level.
Yes, it's great to hear that sort of how it all works, the inner workings and stuff like that. But obviously, since leaving the club, you've decided to focus on the platform that was already in place with EBL, but it sort of picked up a head of steam within the last sort of year or so. What was the motivation behind starting EBL? Like, what gap were you trying to fill at the time?
Yeah, so honestly, I was just a kid who just loved football, and I just wanted to talk about it. I just wanted to kind of speak with other people online, give my opinions, and like I said at the start, I'm from Ireland. I never really thought that working in football was going to be something that was possible for me. Um, it's never pushed in schools, or it's never even considered a job. And like I said, analysis itself was very preliminary and at that stage. Um, so yeah, I was just kind of tweeting online, and I've always been absolutely kind of obsessed with the game, like really curious about it. Just I'd hear like these casual opinions in school and stuff when I was a young kid, and they'd be saying this player is terrible or this manager is terrible, and I'm just like, well, that's the manager of Liverpool, like, and that's a player who plays for Liverpool, and I'm like, that surely can't be right. Like, how come people think that when Liverpool thought it was a good idea to employ them in the first place, So I'd be thinking like that doesn't make sense to me. So I wanted to kind of like explore that. And yeah, I'm kind of a visual person. So like if I see something, then I can kind of understand it in my mind, and just writing things down. And ultimately for me, like Twitter is almost just like a library of like my thoughts I just put out online, and I almost just consistently track it myself over time to see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. Um, and it also is almost like a reminder for myself of kind of certain kind of principles and thoughts and stuff about the game. So yeah, I mean, I was started it like that, and then it ended up getting to a point where I hit 10,000 followers, and I was like, maybe this could actually become something. And at that point, I was just coming to an end of a psychology degree, which I did, but I didn't really want to do because my passion has always been football. And I was like, you know what? That kind of gave me the confidence to say, I'm going to try and do everything I can now to try and work in this industry, and luckily that's what happened.
And you went in and got an MSc in performance analysis and built a really strong presence on X with EBL. How important is it for analysts now to communicate ideas publicly rather than just within football clubs?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think for me, um, sometimes you see kind of people and they almost want to keep the ideas to themselves because they think it's a really good idea, and I think that's the worst possible thing you can do, because I'm always on X trying to see if there's any other good accounts out there, and I will give them a shout out and hopefully get them some more followers, and hopefully they continue to tweet, because if they do, then that's amazing for me because I can learn. So if anything, it's almost me being more selfish. I just want as many people as possible who are producing as many good quality analysis and tweets as possible, because that way I can learn the most and everyone else can learn the most. So yeah, that's pretty much my opinion on that.
And it's almost building a sort of library of information without having to sort of go to the source of it. Social media is great in a sense of you get a wide range of opinions all in one place, and it's really interesting to sort of pick up on different viewpoints and stuff. But with that comes certain misconceptions and certain sort of opinions being taken the wrong way or out of context. What's one misconception fans have about analysis, or indeed analysts working in football?
Um, I think there's probably a stereotype around analysts that they're like computer geeks, I'd say. I think that's probably the biggest stereotype. And I think that sometimes stereotypes for a reason. And I think sometimes that can be true. But I think any good analyst is equally as good at communicating, because if you have all of the knowledge in your head and you cannot communicate it to someone else in a really simple and concise manner, then it's wasted knowledge, you know. I think, you know, when I was interviewing for, like, for example, my replacement at Colchester, and the guy who's actually, you know, he's got the job now, all I cared about was his ability to analyze football, and that was it. That was all I cared about. Didn't worry about his technical competence or anything like that. I think everyone nowadays has some sort of technical competence. They can use a phone, they can use a laptop. I just want someone who knows how to analyze football, and we can teach you the kind of basic stuff after that, you know. But also the second thing, so that's not the only thing, so I lied. The second thing is you need to be able to communicate that in a really clear manner. And you need to be able to do it not only to coaches, you need to be able to do it to players, you know. So I think both are equally as important. And I think the best sign of an analyst is if you can minimize the message and get across a complex point in a really simple way, then that's your job done. You know, that's what you need to do. So I might watch 5 or 6 games, and maybe the opposition analysis meeting only lasts 10 minutes or so, because I've condensed all of the necessary points into that time frame, and I'm aligned with the coaching staff, so they know that they can trust my analysis, and that's just efficient because, like, coaches have so much else to do. It's great for them if they have an analyst that they can trust.
Yeah, definitely, and it's really interesting to sort of uh, that conciseness of it, and being able to deliver to sort of different people in terms of coaches and players in a clear manner, and in a way that's probably personable enough that you can do it and have those difficult conversations, but also in a way that you can celebrate the successes too.
Definitely,
Like,
and that
oh,
for
sorry,
me,
go.
sorry, that for me is why I love Twitter, because you can just condense your thoughts into one tweet.
Hmm.
So I could be thinking about this game or whatever, and there's so many different aspects to the game, but you have to condense it into however many characters it is. I can't remember anymore, but there's a finite amount of characters, and you have to condense your thoughts into that tweet, you know. So that for me is also, it helps simplify things.
It certainly does. It's an underutilized tool sometimes, Twitter. I think Si and I are certainly aware of that, trying to promote the podcast as well. A slightly tougher one. Do you think that some clubs still underutilize analysis?
Um, I think it depends. Every club is different. You see, heavily depends on the coach, and it depends on the sporting director as well. I think I saw a stat only today. I think, like, the average stay of a sporting director in 2026 is like less than 2 years. Yet a sporting director is meant to kind of determine the long term vision of a football club, but they're not there for the long term, you know. So I think that's an issue, and I also think with coaches, their average stay at a football club is less than a year. So that's another issue, because, like I said at the start, at Colchester, I was very fortunate because I was, you know, highly aligned with Danny and Mickey and their way of thinking. And like I said, all we care about is winning. So as much as I get on with them as people, if I disagreed with them in any way, I have to say it, because we need to win. Like, you know, it's you know, the fans, the club, the players, everyone's livelihood is on the line. You know, if say, for example, if Colchester were to get relegated from League Two, like, people will lose their jobs. You know, so it's not an industry where you can bite your tongue. You have to be completely honest at all times, and that's in a context for me where, you know, we were very, very fortunate to be aligned with how we saw the game. But, you know, maybe that's not the case with another analyst and another coaching staff, and that would be problematic in terms of that relationship, you know, because if it's a good analyst and if it's a good coach and staff, because you know you have to stay true to your principles. You know, so I think it depends on each situation really. I think that alignment in terms of the every aspect that it's important to be a good analyst needs to be there to kind of cater their qualities to the coach and what the coach wants, and ultimately to have a very clear process from top to bottom.
Certainly. And finally, what's next for you and for EBL? Obviously, the X account is growing and growing and growing, but there's a Substack as well, which there is a subscription based service where people can sort of learn and grow their own sort of knowledge and pedagogy in terms of performance analysis. Where would you like to take things in the next couple of years for yourself and for EBL?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of obsessed again, just with learning about the game and just discussing that online really. So that's my foundation behind everything, you know. So that's number one. And then secondly, the amount of people and messages I've got over the years in terms of, you know, how can I work in football or how can I analyze football and you know, kind of do these things is unbelievable. Like, you know, because it all comes back to what I was when I was a kid, and it was like, you know, like everyone else, we all want to work in football. Most of us aren't good enough to be players, so it's like, how can we do that? You know, so I was very fortunate to be able to do that and to still do that. So part of my work now is to try and help people do that. You know, first in terms of career path and these kind of things, but also second in terms of how to actually analyze the game, and then yeah, in terms of me specifically. So that's my kind of broader intentions, but I'm also at the moment kind of working with some players and clubs and these kind of things in terms of consultations and yeah, staying in touch with the game in that way. So it's that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Brilliant. Enda, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your insights. It's been really interesting to know the inner workings of the role, and I think you've definitely addressed some of the misconceptions that you fans may have.
Yes, massively appreciate your time and thank you for having me, guys.
Cool. Cheers,
Thanks,
buddy.
mate.
Thank you.